But because this is a family thing, I've asked them to bring the children up at 12:10 so that we could all pray as a family. So your youth will be coming upstairs. We'll all be praying, and we'll all be taking communion together. So as I prayed and as I asked the Lord what he would have me to preach about, to encourage and to strengthen you, I heard Paul, I heard many people chiming in. I heard James chime in and say, I want to preach me. I want you to talk about life is a vapor. Preach me. Life is but a vapor, and you have not because you ask not. And James was talking to me I was studying James chapter 4, and I was looking at that it's a sin when you know what to do and you're not doing it. Talking about living your life's purpose. And then Solomon was saying, preach me, Life is, there's a season to everything in life. And I want to preach that. But out of all the contenders that came and sat in my living room last night, the one that resonated with me the most was Paul. Paul said, preach me, because there's some hope in this passage. And so 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 through 8. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 through 8 in the New King James Version, and it is on the screen. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to ask you to stand, but it is for you on the screen. Paul says to his protege Timothy, I have fought a good fight. I have finished the race. I've kept the faith. Finally, look at somebody say finally. There is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. And I want to preach from the subject, finish at the end. All right. Look at somebody say, finish at the end. Kobe's tragedy struck us all at our core. And here's when I began to really pay attention, is when my colleagues, my preaching colleagues, one of my colleagues was telling me that when he got the news at the end of service last week, he almost broke down in the pulpit and couldn't finish the service because it had impacted him. One of my other colleagues that lives in LA was telling me that he didn't even know if he could even preach this Sunday because he was so impacted by the news. And so we've seen again that this tragedy has shaken many of us to our core. When you research Kobe, and Kobe has been called many things. And if you Google Kobe being the greatest of all time, the GOAT, a few weeks ago, people were saying that he was never the greatest, and here's the reason why he'll never be great. But all of a sudden, after this loss, now all of a sudden, he's the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. And here's what you got to learn as we move forward, is people will not celebrate you when you're living. People will antagonize you your entire life. But those same people that talked about you, that had your name in their mouth and it wasn't for prayer, all of a sudden when they lose you, you're the greatest of all times. And if there's nothing else that I've learned over this past week, especially of this last 24 hours of researching this man's life, is you cannot allow your greatness to be determined by the people around you. Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate it. You can't allow your greatness to be determined by the people around you, because guess what? Here's what you got to understand, is people don't know how to celebrate people who intimidate them. Can I say that again? People do not know how to celebrate people who they are intimidated by. Let me put it to you this way. How many of you have ever been minding your own business? You've been minding your own business. You've been doing what you've been doing. You minding your own business. Can I say that again? You've been minding your own business. And all of a sudden, you do something that gets notoriety, that gets recognized, and then all of a sudden, people come out the woodworks who you never knew. And some people that come out the woodworks, you do know, you had a good relationship. Everything was fine and dandy until you started excelling, and they were no longer excelling. Anybody been there? And those people that you anticipated celebrating you having your back, you found that it was those people that stabbed you in the back first and have the nerve to say, there's a knife in your back. Who put it there? And you're trying to figure out who put the knife in your back when you realize they were the one that put it in your back. Because here's the thing, is people who do not know how to be great don't want you to be great. They want you to come down to their level because it makes them comfortable. Greatness is uncomfortable. And those of you that want to be comfortable, you will never be great. You will be mediocre. You will be okay. You will get by. But those of you that want to be great, you have to understand that you have to live in a place called the discomfort zone. You got to live there. Because when you're uncomfortable, it forces you to make decisions. How many of you are very comfortable? You're very comfortable in your life. Let me ask this question. How many of you want more, but you're too comfortable where you are? All right. Amen. Thank you for being here. Kobe lived by a few principles. And here's the thing. Here's a couple of principles that you live by. They live by. They asked him what failure was like. They said, describe failure. What does that sound like? What does that feel like? And he said, failure is exciting. And I had a flashback to different strokes. I said, what you talking about, Kobe? As he explained it, he said the reason why failure is exciting is because it gives you another opportunity to learn. If you study your failure, you realize that your failure is really a blessing, because if you look at it, it's a lesson that you can learn that can help teach you what to do next. He described one of his proteges that had lost the game. I believe it was against Notre Dame, and lost the games in the finals. And he talks to her and he says, okay, did you study that game? And she said, no, I haven't looked at that game. And he said, why? And she said, because it's too hurtful, because we lost the game. And it wasn't by a very huge point margin. It was maybe by 2 points they lost it. And he said, you've got to force yourself to look at the game, to study it, because you're going to play that same team this year. And he said, if you want to be successful, you have to study what you did and did not do last time. So here's what I'm going to say. That those of us that keep going around in circles in our lives, it's because we refuse to look at the playback. We refuse to study the game, this game called life. Look at somebody and say, you're in a game called life. We refuse to look at that. Kobe embraced failure, but not failure to move into pity. Listen to this. Listen to this. Ready? He embraced failure to propel him further into purpose. He had something called commitment. And that is exactly what Paul outlines to his protege Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4. Paul had something called commitment. If you're going to be great, you got to have commitment. That means you got to show up when you don't want to show up. That means that you have to do things that other people are not willing to do. That means while everybody out there is playing and having fun, you're in there studying your craft. You're doing what you got to do. Kobe talked about while everybody was taking the summer off, he was studying. He was going to tournaments. He was sitting. He was studying his craft. Why? Because he wanted to be great. He talked even about his teammates when he moved into a leadership role. He said that they wanted to go out and party after the games while they were traveling on the road. And he said, you need to rest. And he said, they said, well, we can go ahead and we can do what we want to do. And he said, okay, if that's what you want to do, he said, I'll go ahead and I'll do it with you because I want to make sure you're safe. I want to support you. He said they would go out and they'd be out all night. He said, but guess what? He said at 5 o'clock in the morning, he was banging on their door because he said, I hung with you, now you got to hang with me. Greatness causes you to have to do things that are uncomfortable. You have to have commitment. 3 commitments I want you to see today. Ready? The first commitment is you have to have the commitment to the fight. Look at somebody, so you got to be committed to fight. You got to be committed to the fight. Paul says, I fought a good fight. Paul says in this pericope in his letter to Timothy, he said, I know that the end is near for me. I can feel death upon me. I don't know when it's going to be happening. I don't know where it is. He said, but I fought a good fight. All of us in here have a fight to fight. As a matter of fact, some of you come here because you ain't got to fight in here. But then again, yesterday in our meeting, we were talking about the D church and about how some people that have come to church and have left church is because the one place they didn't want to fight was the place in the church. Right. I don't want to fight you. Look at somebody and say, I don't want to fight you. Because the fight, there's too much fighting out there. There's too much in the world. There's too much in society. We got to fight. And let me tell you the biggest fight of all. My biggest fight is not with my family. My biggest fight is not with my finances. My biggest fight is not with any of that. My biggest fight is with Deshaun. That your biggest fight is with yourself. You've got to be committed to the fight. Paul was a man who was extremely eloquent. He knew, scholars say that he knew at least 8 languages. He was both a Roman and a Jewish citizen. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He had everything going on. He was a great Israelite. He was somebody who knew everything. But when he met Jesus, he realized that all of that was for nothing. And so because he was so influential in the church world, in Jewish society, when he finally converted to Christianity, when he finally decided to live his life for Jesus, he had a fight. Because people didn't understand why he made the change in his life. But let me say this, that sometimes when you make a change in your life for the better, people will fight you because they don't want you to be different. They want you to remain the same because, again, it's not that they don't want to see you succeed as much as they want to be made comfortable. Yeah. Your change highlights their not changing. Right. Your success highlights their unsuccess. Yeah. You got to be committed to the fight. You have to be committed to the fight, you all. There's a fight every day in our lives. Yeah. And you've got to be committed to the fight. Yeah. Many of us want to throw in the towel. You want to throw in the towel because life gets hard, right? Yeah. I had a friend that wanted to commit suicide, and we didn't know that we didn't know she was suicidal. And I said, suicide is the cowardly way out. And she said, what do you mean? She said, life would be so much better. I said, you realize that when you take your life is over. Right. Yeah. There is no life. I just can't deal with everything. I said, why can't you deal with everything? Because of this, because of that, and everything she was going through, her suicidal thoughts were because she could not handle other people's opinions about herself. So here's what I'm going to tell you. You can't avoid everybody, but you ain't got to be up underneath everybody. Can I say that again? You can't avoid everybody, but you don't need to be running to be up underneath everybody. If there are people that are harmful to you, stay away from them. If you know they're bad for your psyche, stay away from them. They're bad for your spirit, stay away from them. Delete your number. Delete their number. Delete it. And if they still figure out a way to hit you up, change your phone number. Your contacts will transfer to your new number. But you have to be committed to the fight. Every day we are fighting something. Fighting society. You're fighting financial. We're fighting social justice. We're fighting something. Yes. And sometimes it gets tiring. But here's the thing. Take a break, but get back in the ring. Second thing, you got to be committed to the finish. Yes. Paul says, I fought a good fight. Yes. Thank you. I fought a good fight. Yeah. Not just a fight, I fought a good fight. Yeah. How many of you have ever paid to see a boxing match that wasn't good? Horrible. How many of you ever gone to a basketball game that was just a shutout? And after a while, you're mad because you're mad because it's a shutout. On one hand, you're like, okay, that's great, but you go to games because you want to see the fight. And don't you know people are looking at you because they want to see how you fight. They want to see how you show up. But you got to be committed to the finish. You have to be committed to finishing what you start. And for many of us, our greatness will never come because we don't know how to see things all the way through. Kobe, in his same interview, the reason why we're talking about rest at the end is because he said that there's a principle that he learned from his English teacher. And his English teacher would say to them, he said, rest at the end, not in the middle. And he said he lived his life based upon that principle. And so he said, I still got life in me. He said, I'm not at the end of my life yet. He said, so I can't rest now because I'm only in the middle. He said, I got to rest at the end. And somebody here today needs to hear that you cannot rest right now. Take a breather, but don't rest. Take a swig of water, but don't rest. Don't. If water's not doing it, go get some smart water with some electrolytes in it. Go get some Gatorade. Go get some All Sport. They don't make All Sport anymore. I'm dating myself. But greatness does not allow you to rest at the beginning or the middle of your story. Your greatness, it does not allow you to rest until the end. Miles Monroe says that the richest place for the most entrepreneurs, for the greatest dreams, for the greatest business ideas is in the graveyard. Miles Monroe says that the richest place in all of the world is in the graveyard. Dreams that were never fulfilled, purposes that were never lived out, entrepreneurs that were never ever created, preachers that we've never heard, singers that we've never heard sing. How many of you in here feel there's more inside of you? You feel there's greater on the inside of you? Let me see your hands. There's more on the inside of you. But then how many of you get tripped up because there's this fight that you didn't anticipate? Let's be real. Let me see those hands again. And when we don't preach and teach about the fight that you got to come up against, it makes you wonder, did God call me to this? Anything God calls you to, he equips you to fight for it. Did you get that? When he gave the children of Israel Canaan, he equipped them to fight for it. Right. Did you see that? Yes. So that means that anything in your life, it's not going to come easy. We got to stop teaching our children. We got to stop teaching our young people. We have to stop teaching people that if it's easy, then it's God. And if it's not easy, it's not God. That is not true. If freedom was easy, if freedom was not supposed to be hard, then Martin Luther King wouldn't have marched, y'all. Right. We're here because Martin got up and Rosa sat down. Y'all get that? People did certain things. We're here because there were certain people that sat at lunch counters and was hunted by dogs, and they were hosed out of there. They were people. We're here because there are people that hung on trees by people were. Come on, you all. There are people that march, and while I understand that there are different sets of people that have marched, there are women that have marched in the 20s for women to have the right to vote. Come on, you all. If freedom was easy, come on. Anybody that knew that there was a prize on the other side and knew that they had to go through conflict to get it, they had to be committed to the finish, you all. Look at somebody say, finish something. Finish something. Just something. Just get one thing. I want you to get one thing on your mind this week. I want just one thing. Not two, not three, not four. Just one thing. Finish something. Yeah. Finish your hair. Finish it. You done braided this out, put it up in a ponytail, and this part is still. And then you say, okay, ain't nobody see it, I'm going ahead and get it. And then when it comes down, you braise on the outside of, no, finish something. Finish something. Finish that degree. Finish working for that promotion. Parents, finish training your children. Men, finish loving on your men, loving on your boys. Wrap your arms around them. Let them know they are loved. That they don't have to go out there and seek it from a gang. They don't have to go out there and seek it from the world. That they can go to their daddy, and their daddy is man enough to say, son, I love you. And I'm going to wrap my, come on, men, women, take your young ladies, teach them how to do their hair. Teach them how to have class. Teach them how to have respect. Daddies, tell your daughters that they are princesses and they are queens and they deserve the best and they deserve value. Mamas, tell your boys that they don't have to settle for pigeons. They can settle for some, and teach them how to treat their young women. Teach them how to parent their children. Teach them how to love on them. Teach them how to handle their finances. Teach them how to set up a legacy. Teach them how to save up money for a rainy day. Teach them to finish something. Help them find committed. Help them find commitment. And let them know that your biggest commitment is them. Kobe said when he was 11 years old, he was playing a game. He's playing basketball. And he missed every shot. I'm going to preach. He missed every shot that day, and he was devastated. He was crying. He was defeated. And his father pulled him aside. And his father said to him, whether you win, whether you lose, one thing is going to remain constant, is that my love for you will never change. He said when he heard that he had the support of his father, no matter what decision he made, he said he knew he then had the ability to fail because he knew that his father's love never changed. And some of you need to know today that no matter what you do, that God's love for you never changes. But beyond all that, we that represent God, we need to let you know we have a decision to help you know that even though in life you may fail, that our love for you won't change. Leaders in here, stand up. Leaders, I need all leaders to stand up. The congregation outweighs us. And that's for a reason. And we as leadership have got to let the people know by our actions, not just our words. We got to let them know by our actions that no matter what they do, we still going to love them. We're going to love you into wholeness. We're going to love you back. That we love you no matter what. And if and when you fail, we'll help you fail forward and not backwards. Let me have your seats. He was committed. Paul was committed to the fight. He was committed to the finish. But the third commitment that he was committed to, he was committed to the faith. I've read this story. I've read this over and over again. I've read this over and over again. And I've always misquoted it. Not from the standpoint I got the words wrong, I had the order wrong. So when I would quote it, I would say, I fought a good fight, I've kept the faith, I've finished my course, right? And as I was studying, the order Paul uses is significant in this pericope. Because he says the first thing is, I fought a good fight. Look at what I said, I fought a good fight. It was a good fight. Second, I have finished my course. Third of all, I've kept the faith. I always thought that the greatest part of this was to finish the course, Deacon Jones. I thought, and the Holy Spirit said, as I was praying and studying, he said, the greatest part of this text is not the finishing of the course. I said, well, bring me out. And he said, because no matter whether you are Whether you are Christian, whether you Muslim, whether you Buddhist, whether you're agnostic, whether you're atheist, it doesn't matter what your background is. There's two things that everybody in here, that everybody on this world is going to go through. Yeah. They all going to go through a fight. Yeah. And they all got to finish. Yeah. But the shouting point, you all, is that he kept the faith. Yeah. In basketball, there's a ball. Right. In football, there's a... All right, let's see if you can catch on. In soccer, there's a... In baseball, there's a... And so while you have bats, and you have mitts, and you have cleats, and while you have pads, and while you have all of those things, that at the end of the day, the most important thing in the game is the ball. There you go. In soccer, the only way they run up and down the field, and those of you that play soccer, God bless you, that's too much running for me. Too much running back and forth to only get 2 points. The whole game. I didn't run the whole game, and I got 2 points, or a point and a half. How'd you get a point and a half? There's a fight over the ball. In baseball, pitcher gets the ball, throws it, you hit the ball. There's a fight over this ball to catch it while it's live in the air, or if it's dropped, then now the ball has got to get to the base to get to the base before the runner gets there. And if the ball makes it to the base before the runner gets there, then the runner is out. Why? It's all because of the ball. In basketball, they can run up and down that court for 4 quarters, all kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the reason why Deshaun never got on anybody's basketball team is because when I tried out, they said, you have great heart, you have great spirit, you are here on time, you got the best sports drinks, your clothes smell good because my mama made sure they was Downy and Tide and all kind of stuff. You rebound wonderfully, you are fast on the court, but you can never make a shot. And I thought I'm just going to be like Dennis Rodman, just be the rebounder. That's what I thought I was going to do. And they said, you show up, but you can't control the ball. All right. In football, I know many of you are going to be watching Super Bowl today. And I'm going to use this analogy because it's likened closest to how Paul explains this concept. When you throw the ball in football, the biggest thing you got to do after you have caught the football players tell me, once you catch the football, what do you have to do? You got to tuck it, right? And so there was a game my father and I were watching a couple weeks ago, and one thing about my dad, I don't know how he does it, but he can do like 2 or 3 things at one time. He can be watching the game, he can be listening to all of us, our conversation, he'll chime in on it, and he's still in the game. And so my father and I were talking, and you can have them come in. You can have them come in. My father and I were talking, and all of a sudden, he starts yelling, come on, dummy, come on, dummy, come on. Yeah, my dad talks like that. Come on. I'm like, Dad, what's wrong with you? He was like, he got the ball, but he ain't tucking it. He's not tucking it. And it's been a while since I played football. So I said, remind me why. He said, because Deshaun, he said, because now the ball is up here. He said, the ball is not secure. Right. When you're thrown the football, you become the target. Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't tuck the ball, then somebody's going to knock it out your hand. And it's called a fumble. And the fumble, then, when you fumble the ball, now the team is open to get it and to run the ball the opposite direction. Right. So when you get the ball, you got to tuck it, right? When Paul talks about he's been apprehended for that which he's apprehended for, he likens it to being thrown a pass, receiving faith, but tucking it. Yeah. So the shouting point is not the fact that he fought a good fight. The shouting point is not that he finished the course. The shouting point is that when he crossed into the end zone, that he had tucked his faith. Right. When you're thrown a pass in life, and you're thrown the gift of faith, when you're thrown the gift of salvation, you become the target. Yep. Everybody is now after you. Society's after you. The gangs are after you. Drugs are after you. Alcohol's after you. Different schools of thought are after you. Come on, talking. All of those things are after you. And at the end of the day, Paul says, I have kept the faith. We're going to wrap up. I must admit I was struggling with Kobe's death. But what made me have some peace was an interview that I read that was given by his pastor in Newport Beach. He said, Kobe comes to church pretty consistently, but I usually never talk to him. I never get a chance to talk to him. He said, but for some reason, he said, this Sunday, we came out at the same time. He said, and when I saw Kobe, I knew he had been in prayer. Because I had seen the oil. I seen the water on his forehead. So he had blessed himself. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I had known that he had been in the presence of God because of how he looked. And on those final moments of his life, he had an early tournament. He could have done what some of us do. Oh, I got to work today. I got to do this. You know what? Amen. God, hey, God, I'm going to get some more rest. But Kobe's faith was so powerful that before he went ahead to the tournament, he had to stop by the house of God. Yeah. He had to stop by the house of God. And even though he couldn't stay for the church service, he made sure that he did what we do is had a little talk with Jesus. Yeah. Tell him all about our troubles. He will hear our faintest cry and answer by and by. He had a talk with Jesus. Yeah. And what I shouted about was the fact of the matter that when his pastor saw him, Reverend Brooks, his pastor didn't have to ask him what he was doing or where he had been. The pastor said, I saw from a visible perspective that he had been in prayer. Yeah. Yeah. And I want to ask you, how many people can tell that you have been in prayer? How many people can say that you've been in the presence of the Lord based upon how you look? Kobe had a decision to make. And even though he didn't know that that helicopter ride, the thing that he did on a consistent basis, would be his end, he was so committed to tucking his faith that he made sure that he was in the presence of God. And so those lessons today, I want you to take with you. I wish I could tell you why God allowed it. I wish I could. I can't tell you. I can't tell you why the Lord allowed my brothers and sisters to have green eyes and me brown. I can't even explain that. I can't explain that. But one thing I can explain is what are you going to do with the life that's been given to you? Tom said, what's up? I'm going to pose this question, then we're going to pray. My first pastor, Reverend Johnny Collins Sr., was diagnosed with colon cancer in 1993. They gave him 2 years to live. Long story short, he outlived that diagnosis by 5 years. It was 7 years from the time that he got diagnosed to the time that he passed away. And during that time, we saw him more than we had ever seen him. Sister Carter, you know, we saw him a lot at New Jerusalem. We kept asking him, you're all over the place. Like, you just running revivals, you're doing all kinds of stuff, you preaching, you got a radio show, you doing all this stuff. And he said, because my cancer was not a death sentence, he said, it was letting me know that my purpose was limited. That my time to live out my purpose is limited. If you knew the expiration date on your life, how different would you live it? What fear would you get over if you knew the expiration date on your life? What relationships would you reconcile if you knew the expiration date on your life? Who would you tell that you loved them because it was the truth and you didn't say it just to hear it back? What dreams would you fulfill? What degree would you go after? What relationships would you reconcile? Or what relationships would you leave by the wayside? What gifts would you start exploring? What ministry would you start getting into if you knew the expiration date? Kobe didn't know the expiration date on his life, but he knew that he had to rest at the end. And because he knew his purpose is what woke him up, and it's what drove him. And he knew that his help came from God, which is why, in spite of all that he did, before he started his day on that day, he made his way to the house of God to talk with his Creator, to worship him, to pray to him, and to say that all of my help comes from you. I know I took a little more time than I typically do today, but I wanted to talk with you all and give you some scriptural basis. And then I wanted the children to come up because I wanted families to come together because we're going to pray. So at this time, would you, if you're not sitting with your family, would you make your way to your family? If you don't have any blood family in here, biological family is what I'm saying. If you don't have any biological family in here, get with somebody. Yeah, go ahead. Make it easy.